For one final time in 2024, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll have more coming next year, but for now, let's talk about who was the best Bolt in December and what the Lightning could do without Jake Gensel, should he not play in their first game of 2025. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Sperber here, welcoming all of you for the final time in 2024 to Locked On Lightning and thanking you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. And let's start today's show, the final one of the month of December, talking about the Bolt of the Month. The poll will be available on our X page by the time you finish watching this clip, most likely. And we do have 4 candidates for the Lightning's Bolt of the Month. First is going to be their goalie, Andrei Vasilevskiy, who, fair warning, probably going to be a candidate every single month. A little bit of goalie bias, but you guys can feel free to yell at me about that in the comment section. Braden Point, who led the Lightning in points with 22 in the month of December. Nikita Kucherov and Jake Gensel are the 4 choices for Bolt of the Month. And let's break down their cases. Andrei Vasilevskiy is the first one that we're going to discuss, a record of 6-2-0 in 8 starts in the month of December. Allowed 17 goals on 226 shots for a grand total of 210 saves, 13th in the NHL over the month of December. He also had a save percentage of .929 and helped the Lightning to their most efficient month of the season in terms of winning percentage, tying the Lightning with their October mark for their most wins in the month of the year. With the backing of Andrei Vasilevskiy's stonewall demeanor in net, the Lightning were able to reach 20 wins, keep themselves near the top of the playoff hunt. And by the playoff hunt, I mean the wild card race more particularly. And Vasilevskiy has certainly kept the Lightning in games time after time. And the most recent example of this came on the penultimate game of 2024 for the Lightning, that game against the Rangers. The Lightning were outshot by 19. They had 25 shots on 2 different Rangers goalies. Their efficiency certainly helped there, but when your goalie stops 42 of 44 shots, that is pretty darn impressive. It was the most saves in a single game by a Lightning player over the course of this season. And who else would it be but Andrei Vasilevskiy? He might not be top 5 in a bunch of different stat categories for NHL goalies, but he is currently tied with Sergei Bobrovsky of the Florida Panthers for the 4th most wins in the entire NHL. 16 wins for Vasilevskiy so far, getting 6 of them in December, which were a tie for his most as well. So Vasilevskiy continues to keep the Lightning in games and continues to prove that he is one of, if not the best goalies in the entire world. Right now, it seems like Connor Hellebuyck is well on top of that Vezina race, leading the NHL in save percentage, goals against average, and wins. But Vasilevskiy is certainly a guy that has to be in that mention year in and year out. And this was one of his best months of the season, so he might win our Bolt of the Month. And now we'll get to some of the Lightning's statistical leaders, namely Braden Point, who was tied with Nikita Kucherov for the Lightning's assist lead in 11 games in December, finished with +4. 22 total points, tied for second with Brandon Hagel in December in Lightning goals with 7, and tied with Nikita Kucherov for first in Lightning assists over the month of December. And that is what really stood out for me. Again, we've had this conversation before. I don't want to say that Braden Point is a one-dimensional player, because he's not. He is just an offensive force, a great talent. He wins faceoffs, he gets goals, and his passing just continues to improve. And it's solid. I mean, that pass against the Rangers that Kucherov scored on for the Lightning's first goal in that game on Saturday was just one of the prettiest looking goals of the season. Just great passing up the ice, and Braden Point with just an inch perfect drive to Cooch to get the Lightning that first goal. He's had a couple of multi-goal games, just has been outstanding for the Lightning all season long. And for Point, December might have been his best month, and he is on a couple of award watch lists as well. Point is tied for second with Kirill Kaprizov of the Wild and William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs for second in the league in goals scored. Only Leon Draisaitl has three more to be exact, with 26 goals. Point, though, has missed a couple of games here and there to injuries. Nothing serious, but he has been forced to miss some time, and it seems like the day after he comes back from the injured list is just going to be the best game of the season for him. Case in point, this was in November, and no pun intended on the case in point, by the way. In November, his first game coming off of injury list, he scored 2 goals, including an overtime winner against Pittsburgh, had a similar stat line against Nashville, and just continued to factor in the Lightning offense in multiple clutch situations over the course of December. And Point was certainly the key for the Lightning to win a number of games and leading the Bolts in points in the month of December. I think for that reason and that reason alone, just for the punny nature of it, Point is the point leader. Might get my vote, but of course you guys are free to vote for whomever you choose, including Nikita Kucherov, who did have a scary injury earlier on. He was taken out of a game, did miss a contest for the Lightning in December. He played 10 games and still tied with Braden Point for the team lead in assists with 15 over his 10 games played, finished with +7, which was second among all Lightning forwards, including Anthony Cirelli, who was tied for 5th in the league in plus-minus, as Kucherov finished December with a plus-minus of +7. So just another really strong month for Nikita Kucherov, getting a game-winning goal as well. Another addition to Braden Point's Bolt of the Month ledger. He had 2 game-winning goals, more than any Bolts player in the month. And Nikita Kucherov continues to be near the top of the Hart race, 54 points on the season for Kucherov, which is behind Leon Draisaitl and Nathan MacKinnon. 6 points outside of the Hart Trophy is Nikita Kucherov. He is also third in the league with 37 assists, trailing 9 behind Nathan MacKinnon for the league lead and 1 behind Jack Eichel, in 4 fewer games played than Eichel and 5 fewer games played than MacKinnon. Now, is Kucherov going to stay the Lightning MVP for likely as long as he stays on the team? Probably. But in terms of the Bolt of the Month, maybe missing that one game could have him lose out to Braden Point in this particular very prestigious award here on Locked On Lightning. Kucherov certainly a valuable piece, but those 2 extra goals for Point might be enough to put you in Point's favor. But I mean, it's hard to vote against Nikita Kucherov really in anything. He is one of, if not the best player in the entire NHL. And last but not least, a guy that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the third segment, Jake Guentzel, continuing a great start to his Lightning career, led the Lightning in goals in the month of December, including rocking an 8-game goal streak, which is longer than any other such streak in the course of the season. Led all Lightning forwards and all Lightning players, including Ryan McDonagh, except for Ryan McDonagh, who had a +12 in December and leads the league in plus-minus at +22. Jake Guentzel led all Lightning forwards at +8, averaging 1.5 per game in 10 games, missing 1 due to injury. And of course, coming out early in their last game against the Habs. So Jake Guentzel, the Lightning goal-scoring leader, is that big goal streak enough to make him the Bolt of the Month? We're going to talk a little bit more about really how to replace Guentzel in a later segment, but that's more just replacing him on lines if he ends up being injured. But he has proven that he is going to be a strong force for this Lightning team on offense for years to come. Gensel has done everything the Lightning have needed him to do. He has been exactly the offensive weapon that they have needed on that first line since losing Steven Stamkos to the Predators, and he has lived up to all of his expectations. After starting the month fourth or fifth on the Lightning in points, he climbed Anthony Cirelli with 37 points, 20 goals, and 17 assists, second to only Braden Point in goals scored for the Bolts this season. And we'll talk a little bit more about Gensel later on, but next up, it's New Year's Eve. Let's talk about some New Year's resolutions for the Tampa Bay Lightning when we return. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one convenient place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year financially. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services that I wasn't using anymore and saved a ton doing it. Plus, with their goals feature, I've already been able to automatically set aside money for my future, which means no more stressing about budgeting every single month. So, cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. The link is below. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions today at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And welcome back into Locked On Lightning. I thought that it would be fitting to do a little New Year's resolution segment for the Tampa Bay Lightning on this day, the final day of 2024. First and foremost, I think the one thing the Lightning need to improve the most is defensively. The Lightning have just some really solid defensive players, but they're a team that I think has so much impetus on the offensive side, and that sometimes their transition can end up going the wrong way. The transition offense is really where Lightning shine. They've got Nikita Kucherov is one of the best passers in the league. Victor Hedman is a fantastic setup man, passing-wise from the defensive end, pushing the puck up the ice and pushing the team up the ice while still being relatively locked down defender as well at 34. But just there have been some games where the Lightning just haven't seemed to be there defensively. And I don't want to say the Lightning are a bad defensive team because they're not. But if you're looking for weaknesses on this Lightning team, it is that defensive unit. And for me, I think the solution for that is going to be address it at the trade deadline. One player that the Lightning have been linked with is Ivan Provorov of the Columbus Blue Jackets, who is one of a handful of defenders that is on the trade block. Cam Fowler of the Ducks is now no longer with the Ducks, as he was one of the first dominoes to fall in the trading season that we currently seem to be in. Whether that answer for the Lightning is in an extra defender or just, a new defensive scheme, a way to tighten things up, maybe adding a two-way forward, but I still think the Lightning are going to be buyers in that trade deadline. And I think they could certainly use it to help their defense. Their two-way forward play comes in many forms. Nick Paul, Anthony Cirelli, Brandon Hagel have emerged as some of the better two-way forwards in the entire league, with Anthony Cirelli, in my mind, being a leading candidate for the Frank Selke Trophy as the leading two-way forward in the entire NHL. Maybe the Lightning will need to add another one or two of those. They've certainly got a good mix of offensive, defensive, power forwards, two-way guys. I mean, they have a good mix, but I think that's going to be an answer that they'll have to address in the trade deadline. They might end up making some call-ups from the NHL. I know, or from the AHL, excuse me. I know Derek Pulio is a guy that I've really talked about as someone who I think deserves a shot with Tampa Bay. He's got a lot of experience in the NHL over the past couple of years. And, offensively, defensively, he's been a force for Syracuse. And as a defender, he still leads the crunching points at the end of 2024. So maybe he's the answer. Maybe the answer is going to be found in the trade deadline, whether it's a defender or a forward. But I think another New Year's resolution just has to be the Lightning buying at the trade deadline. They've got a solid roster. I don't want to knock the talent and the depth that the Lightning have because, they might be in the middle of the pack, but they're still a contending team. They're still a playoff team, and they're still a team that no one really wants to face. They've got a high-powered offense and a couple of solid defensive players and two of the top 5 in the league in terms of plus minus. So this is a team that can push the needle in the positive way, but I just think they need one extra piece to get themselves from playoff contender, maybe even dark horse, to a serious title contender. Now, whether that's them making just a big move and trying to chase a star or getting, one or two, maybe 3 complementary players that can be put on a second or a third line. I think either of those will work, but I don't think the Lightning can afford to just stand pat at the trade deadline. I don't think they're in a position where they're going to want to just sell off their key players because they are certainly a team well positioned for a playoff run. They're leading the wild card race right now with 3 games in hand over the top 2 teams in their division, 2 points and 4 games in hand against the Boston Bruins, who have maintained a solid position in that Atlantic division, despite getting the first coach fired in the NHL season. So that trade deadline, I think, is going to be big for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that is something that I'm going to be watching very closely as it comes up within the next couple of months, whether the Lightning make a move before the trade deadline or whether they wait till the last minute to make a move at the deadline. I just think that there needs to be just a little bit extra, that the Lightning need to just add, 1 or 2 more pieces to really put themselves over the edge and really solidify themselves as a team that has a shot at taking home what would hopefully be the franchise's 4th Stanley Cup. And some other New Year's resolutions. One of them is really less up to their control, but that's just shedding the injury bug. Especially in the last few months, the Lightning have really been hit hard by injuries, whether it's been, Nick Paul out for a couple of weeks, JJ Moser's injury that likely is going to have him out till right around the All-Star break. The Lightning have just had guys kind of going in and out, a couple of periods where it seemed like every single day there was a new player being called up from the AHL. Lately, other than the JJ Moser injury, it's died down a little bit. I think the back-to-backs muddled that. Again, I'm not sure if Jake Gensel would have been held out of Sunday's game had the Lightning not played less than 24 hours before. But, he's one of your star players. Give him that extra little bit of rest. Unfortunately, the Lightning lost that game against the Canadiens, but it hopefully could mean he comes back stronger against the San Jose Sharks. He was one of multiple Lightning players who scored a goal in the 8-1 win the Lightning had against San Jose when they came to Amalie Arena earlier this season. And last but not least, in terms of the Lightning's New Year's resolution, let's move around some of these younger players. We've seen it in pieces, particularly with Connor Geekie getting some chances on the second line, earning himself more and more minutes, it seems, and playing a lot for a guy who had 0 NHL experience outside of the preseason when he debuted with Tampa Bay this year. He's certainly not the only high-level youngster that the Lightning have. On offense, you've got Gage Gonzalez, 24 years old, and he began the season in the AHL. Has a +1 right now, a goal and an assist. So the offensive numbers are slowly starting to rise. He got his first NHL goal a couple weeks ago. I'd like to see maybe move him up a couple lines, maybe put Gage Gonzalez on the second line sometime. Connor Geekie has certainly been the more publicized of the Bolts rookies and of their young talents, but that can't discount from Gage Gonzalez really showing that he can be a solid contributor. I don't think I've seen the flashes of stardom as much from Gage that I've seen from Geekie, but Gonzalez, I think, can still be a top six or nine player in his NHL career. So I'd like to see the Lightning maybe experiment with moving him up and down some of the lines, maybe get him onto that second line in that right wing spot where he plays quite a bit, and not only have Geekie as the one who has been moving up and down lines. And one player who has mainly stayed on one line, the Lightning could be without when they take on the San Jose Sharks on January 2nd. Now, as I have said on the show before, Guentzel is someone who I expect to play in that Sharks game. I believe he was held out because it was just a back-to-back and the Lightning were trying to be careful with one of their new star players. But should Guentzel not be able to go against the Sharks when the Lightning make their California road trip to start off 2025, how should the Bolts handle that? We'll discuss that and more in the next segment. Welcome into the final segment of 2024. Man, that feels weird to say, but here we are on New Year's Eve. The Lightning had a day off on Monday, so not much more new news. Sorry, New Heights. Has been revealed on Jay Guentzel. He missed the game against the Canadiens after picking up what hopefully is just a minor injury in the grand scheme of things. Lightning did take a day off. They'll travel on New Year's Day to San Jose for a game against the San Jose Sharks. Coincidentally, that January 2nd day, we will be back as we'll take a day off on New Year's Day here on Locked On Lightning as well. But if Jake Guentzel doesn't go, how can the Lightning switch around their lines? Now, what seems to be the obvious choice is the second line winger on the left side moves up to the first line. In the Lightning's case, that's Brandon Hagel. I don't think that's the best choice because of Hagel's chemistry with Anthony Cirelli. Now, Hagel is certainly as talented a player as anyone. And in the game against the Canadiens, he played on multiple lines, playing 3 more minutes than any other Lightning player in that game on Sunday. So I don't want to think that Brandon Hagel is not deserving of the first line winger for the Tampa Bay Lightning, because in a lot of ways, you can argue that he has been the best left winger for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season. Case in point, in one more game between Hagel and Guentzel, Hagel has played the extra game. He has just 3 fewer goals, but 7 more assists and a grand total of 4 more points, an extra +4 for Brandon Hagel as well when comparing him to Jake Guentzel. So, statistically, I think it would make the most sense to put Hagel on that first line, but I just think it works too well with Hagel and Cirelli on that same line. So I think that if Guentzel doesn't play, I'd still like to see Hagel and Cirelli stay on the same line, because Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov is a pair that I don't want to break up either. So I don't think Hagel's the answer. The guy I do think is the answer, though, is Nick Paul. He's a guy who's been up and down on, I think, every single line this season. He's barely played on the fourth line, if at all, but he has been bumped up to the first line in injury situations. He's played on the second line with Hagel and Cirelli while settling on the third line for some portion of the season as well. But he's just a nice utility guy. Paul, on the Tampa Bay Lightning roster, is listed as a left winger. He has the ability to play center as well. 9 goals, 11 assists this season, +3 in terms of his plus minus. 2 of his goals were classified as game winner, including 1 that came in overtime. And Nick Paul, I think, has been a quiet force for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season. He did miss a week or so due to injury back in November, which I think hampered some of his lines. And in my opinion, maybe took him out of the hunt for Four Nations. Just getting a little bit extra time with the Lightning might have gotten him a potential spot on Team Canada. He would have been a low-line player there, I think, but that's irrelevant. He was certainly been a guy who, despite being on usually the second or third line for the Lightning, has been an impact player on every side of the puck. He plays really solid defense. He contributes on offense as well, wins faceoffs. I mean, there's just nothing that it seems like he doesn't do. And I think moving him up to that first line could really help because, first off, it gives a little bit more size on that first line. Now, Kucherov and Point are among the best offensive players in the entire NHL. Both of them are about my size, and I'm the guy behind the mic. So not a guy that anyone's going to be too scared of on skates coming anywhere near you on a hockey rink. So Nick Paul, 6'3", well over 200 pounds, where Point and Kucherov, despite being shifty and quick, they are a little bit on the undersized way of things. Cooch is the bigger of the two at 6 foot 180. Braden Point listed at 5'11", 175. And again, at Nick Paul's official listings, 6'4", 230. Having a bigger guy on that line might do well in terms of protecting Point and Kucherov. And I mean, for the most part, I don't really think they need that much protection just because they're that quick. But just having another guy that if someone lines up and gets a clean hit on Point or Kucherov, they might have to deal with Nick Paul. And old St. Nick might have brought plenty of gifts for Lightning players this season. The only gifts he brings for opponents is pain. And I think that it would give a good balance to that line, adding a stronger defensive presence on that first line with Kucherov and Point being two of the best offensive players in the entire league. Nick Paul is just a really solid two-way guy who can still contribute on offense, and it could honestly shake things up a little bit. I'm not saying that defenders are just going to abandon Nick Paul like he is going to be unable to score, but when you take Paul on that line and take Gensel off of it, when you make that replacement, that's a pretty big offensive drop-off. And that says more, I think, about Gensel than it does about Paul, who has 20 points in 28 games on the season, as opposed to Gensel's 37 in 33. Paul definitely has the size advantage on Gensel, but I think offensively, Gensel is definitely the better player. As a two-way player, I think it's Paul. He is certainly a better defender and one of the best defensive forwards on this Lightning team. I think he might be second to Cirelli, if not third behind Brandon Hagel in terms of defensive ability when you're looking at the Lightning forwards. But I think he just brings just that little extra punch on that first line for Tampa Bay. A little extra size, and you're not going to focus on him as much as you focus on Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. Those are two guys that when they're on the ice, if you're on the opposing team, you need to know exactly where they are at every single moment of the period. Not that Nick Paul isn't dangerous on offense, but it just doesn't compare to Point and Kucherov, who have proved by just about every metric this season that they are two of the best offensive players in the entire NHL. And Nick Paul going up to that first line might just mean some reshuffling. Maybe it'll mean the Lightning are going to call up somebody and have, someone new to debut from the AHL, maybe bring back Connor Sheary to fill in on some of the lower lines. But I think Nick Paul, to me, would be the perfect choice to replace Jake Gensel if he has to miss the game against San Jose. And again, that's still not sure. Keep it Locked On Lightning's X account at @LO_Lightning. We'll try and provide you with as many updates as we can as we hear more on potential injuries for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they get ready for their first road trip and their first game of 2025. And that's all you'll see of me until 2025. We're going to take a day off on New Year's Day and spend that time with my family and get ready for the Winter Classic. And before the Winter Classic hits, you'll have another Locked On Lightning show to watch. But for all of you, before we sign off for the last time here in 2024, even when I wasn't the host, before and after, I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in this year. We did reach a big goal by the end of 2024. Within my first month, we got to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which I'm really happy about. We really want to keep getting those subscriptions up. So please, if you're watching, if you're listening, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. We We do the show for you guys, the fans, so we really appreciate your support. We did so much in 2024 and hope to see you guys on the other end of this camera in 2025. So once again, thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day in 2024 and today. And now for your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steele and Flip. Make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So thank you all again for your support all year long, and we will see you in 2025. Have a happy, healthy new year, and go Bolts.